Be doing a movie poster and or video game or book poster. You can choose any of those from any time period in any language that you would like. Whatever you want to choose, I'm perfectly fine with. It does not have to be like a school appropriate movie or book necessarily. So like you can pick something that's rated R, like Misery up here on the screen is rated R. It's a Stephen King book. It's kind of got a lot of heavy topics in it. As long as your poster and like the end results are school appropriate, you can pick most anything you want. Okay, most anything. And everything so far that you all have chosen is perfectly fine and totally acceptable. We are going to refer to this project as a cell shading project. Cell shading is just like another term for like flat shading. And each one of the examples you see up here on the screen, they have very, very minimal shading. Okay, it's things that we've sort of done before, but I want to make sure that you know the proper term for it. It's just when you add the smallest amount of subtle shadows where you need them. Not everything is shaded in. It's not all blended. It's not all perfect gradients. It's a lot of just solid shapes. Okay, I do have an outline on here of the basic project requirements, but I'm going to start by going through this slideshow and just talking to you about everything kind of all at once. So for this project, okay, again, you're going to be doing cell shading. And here's an example of some different types of cell shading. Okay, cell shading, again, it's a lot of just flat shapes that create shadows around things. I do want you to do things that are detailed enough that we can tell what your characters, your objects, your things are that are in your actual picture, but they don't have to be so meticulously shaded that they look like a graphite drawing or something like that. Each one of these examples up here are good examples of cell shading. They have just enough information for us to get a decent sense that they are three-dimensional things. Okay, it's meant to mimic comic book or concept art style. It's used really heavily in video games and in comics. Okay, and basically you're just defining an outline around the border of your lines. Typically, there's not a whole lot of shadows in the middle of objects, they're just around the outlines of things. So if you do have an outline in the middle of the body, like a button or whatever, a hose or something like that on this spacesuit, you can have a shadow there. That makes sense. There's a line there. But you don't necessarily have shading everywhere. Okay, it's not photorealistic. And cells or cell shading just stands for celluloid, which is an older type of shading. Okay, just very minimal, very flat, kind of paper like. Okay, here are some other examples. So these are like highly detailed examples of video game art over here where you can really feel and see all of the textures and all of the detail. Cell shading is just a little bit more simplified. You can still get a good sense of space, a good sense of everything that's in the picture. It's just not as heavily detailed. So you're not necessarily losing any of your concept or any of your image. You're just losing some of that extra work that you would have to put into the actual shading portion of it. Okay, here's another nice example of cell shading. A lot of Studio Ghibli type stuff, a lot of anime, a lot of basic cartoons use cell shading. Okay, yeah. Okay, some other examples here of cell shading. Okay, this is three-dimensional modeling and shading versus cell shading over on the right. Just flat, right around the outline of things, like on the arms and on the t-shirt you see here. Okay, there's some more cell shading. Again, mostly around the outlines or the edges of stuff. Okay, and this is a slightly more advanced type of cell shading. It's got a little more shading to it, but it's still the basic premise is there. Yeah, Zelda has very soft shading. It does follow cell shading rules, but they're not as high contrast. They feel very sort of soft in that way. That's where that term kind of comes from because they're just barely subtle differences in color. Okay. But here's something that looks cell shaded versus something that has a full render with lots of highlights, lots of shadows, and it looks more three dimensional, just more like modeled heavily versus something that just has those flat shapes, which is what we're going for over here on the left. I just want to make sure you see enough examples that it sort of makes sense, the difference between the two. And of course, you can approach cell shading in your own style. Each one of these look a little bit different. Now, I am going to introduce you to two different artists that use cell shading, and they also use masking techniques like what we're going to practice today. One of them is a guy by the name of Ollie Moss. That's him up there on the screen. He is an English graphic artist and illustrator, and he has created a whole lot of movie posters and book covers for a lot of different things. Weirdly enough, he did not start out as a graphic artist at all. He does have a podcast now, so he does do some other sort of related stuff. But he began his life. I'm trying to think if I listed in here exactly what his first job was. Yeah, his illustration work became as a started as a hobby. He created T-shirt designs on this website called Threadless. I'm not sure if Threadless is exactly what it used to be, but you could submit your own designs, and if it had enough upvotes on the website, they would create it in a T-shirt, and you could buy it, and they would give you money for your design. And that's kind of how he started his career. Okay, at first he was in marketing and advertising, and not in the art end of that at all, and he's kind of just transitioned into being an illustrator full time. Here's some of Ollie Moss's really famous posters. All of these are from different books or movies, and they have very, very stylized, very simplistic kind of silhouettes. And that's what we're going to kind of rip from Ollie Moss's design. If you look at each one of these, there is a really stark shape on everyone. Some of them are more details than others, some of them have more of a photographic look than others, but there's always a big outline shape of something that kind of takes over the entire space. And that's what we're going to think about for our particular project is what kind of silhouette would you like to add? These are some of his other posters that he's done. So they don't always have a huge, massive silhouette. This is a series he did for each of the Harry Potter books where it's always looking over the same landscape, but he's approached it a little bit differently for each of the particular novels. Okay, here are some of his other posters. Again, a lot of silhouettes and just very different amounts of detail depending on what the subject is. Yeah, this is an actual poster he did over on the right for a non English version of the Mario movie over the summer or last year. And then these are some very famous posters he sold, which are also on our Canvas course that are of different Star Wars movies. And they were released with like a special anniversary edition of each of the original movies. And they're really cool. They're interesting. Now, his stuff became so popular that there have been a lot of copycats of his style out there. And you all will be kind of copying his style to an extent too. There are a lot of other artists that saw this work really early in the mid 2000s and they loved it and they've built their brand off of similar work. And one of them that's become really famous, and his stuff is different in its own way, but it started based on the work of Ollie Moss, is Levente Sabot. Okay, he creates a lot of similar stuff with silhouettes like this bear that you see here. And this is kind of the same thing, again, that we're going to be doing. And he goes by the artistic name of Brisk, but he's another freelance illustrator. He's actually in Hungary, and he creates a lot of posters, book covers, and he also does packaging for things like sodas and chips and other things like that that need illustrations. So here's some of his book and movie covers, which are also featured on Canvas that you can take a look at. But just like Ollie Moss, they have a lot of silhouettes. They have a lot of extra details. Some of his look a whole lot like Ollie Moss's, like that one of the tiger is very similar to another tiger one that Ollie Moss did. Okay. There's Lord of the Flies over on the left. It's a little cut off, but that's what that is. If you had to read that in class, you probably know exactly what that is. And then there's Misery over on the right, which is also on Canvas. Okay, here's some other silhouettes. And so all of the silhouettes tend to have other pictures inside of them in his creations that give you a sense of the story and let you know a little bit more behind kind of what is going on. And that's kind of what we're going to focus on for our project. Is you are going to start out with a big silhouette of some kind, and we're going to fill it with some other things. So one of the things I want you to consider is a landscape. Okay, every movie, book, or video game has a setting. Now, the landscape does not have to be outdoors, but everything has some kind of setting in some capacity. And there are probably certain parts of the setting that you feel more connected to than others, that you felt were more interesting or exciting or just important to the storyline than others. And I want you to think about what kind of setting or landscape you can include. And your landscape can be very flat like this, cell shading, just like what we see on the screen, where it's just a lot of silhouettes and shapes that are in very basic colors, just kind of laid on top of each other. And you can use silhouettes amongst your landscapes as well. So we'll add not only one large silhouette, but other things inside of it. And I'm going to want you to start by finding some pictures from whatever your thing is. Okay, so may it be a movie or a video game, see what kind of stills you can find. If you're choosing a book, Let's see what kind of images and photographs we can find that actually go with that particular story if there's not a movie or film attached to it. And we're going to trace them and create different silhouettes. Now, you can do your silhouettes in a bunch of different ways. They don't have to be one big silhouette of like someone's face or body. They can be kind of like the two that you see on the screen here. These are more smaller characters that we see just as shapes, which are silhouettes, just shapes. And then we see some landscape things as well. You can use the font or the text from your particular movie, book, or TV show, or whatever it happens to be, video game, on your poster design. I do have some additional like examples and things that you can look at on Canvas in this slideshow if you would like, but we'll get into some of those over the next kind of couple of days. So what I want us to do is right now, I want us to pause really quick and I want you to download some images off of Canvas, and I just want us to practice something really quick. Make sure everybody feels comfortable with making silhouettes and things like that, and then we'll move on, okay? And we'll take a look at some other examples. So pause for a second, come back over to Canvas, go to modules. And if you look underneath today is Thursday, okay, you'll see something that says masking practice. And I know a lot of you are very good at this already, but a lot of you really haven't had a reason to use it that much. So I just want to make sure before you're required to use it, we feel cool, we feel good about it, okay? So click on masking practice, and we're going to do something kind of like what you see here. We're going to create a silhouette like these three here. Okay, but we're going to use some images that I've already got for you. So I've got a silhouette, I've got a landscape, and I've got a character. Go ahead and download all three of those really quick. Don't judge my choices. I picked something I figured you would recognize, but you wouldn't necessarily choose yourself, so that I wasn't reusing a topic you guys are going to reuse. Once you download those, you can go ahead and open Illustrator. All right, and once you've got Illustrator open, we'll make a 12 by 18 document. So the poster that you're eventually going to make is also going to be 12 by 18. Oh, I'm worried. Did some of the classes already make these in previous years? Don't pull a Phelps on me. Don't try to turn that in. I thought Hunter asked because you guys had never done it before.
I don't remember doing it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, we'll do another one. Pick a different topic because I can look back. She could have too, but I know you guys pulled stuff over on her so much. Not you specifically, just some of the other classes. All right, so let's make a 12 by 18 document. Hit create. And let's go ahead and drop our three pictures in there. So I did 12 inches by 18 inches. And I'm just going to grab my Finder window down here at the bottom. And I just like to drag and drop. So I'm just going to go to downloads. You can also go up to file and hit place. Either one it's the same general thing. It's just not called import in Illustrator. It's called place. Okay, but I'm just going to drag and drop these three pictures from Shrek. Okay, cool. Again, I figured this is something you would recognize, but nobody was probably going to be fighting over the Shrek movie as far as I was concerned for their own poster, so I didn't figure it would hurt to use this one. Okay. So here's what we're going to do first. Okay, we're going to take this picture over here that has black and white illustrations of different characters from Shrek, and we're going to image trace it, which I know most of you are pretty good at this point. And we're going to use this to create your silhouette. If I can help you work smarter and not harder, that is always my end goal. If you do pick something like a very popular video game or movie, there are probably going to be black and white silhouettes of those characters already. Probably. Okay. Sometimes there's not, and you have to trace and make your own, but sometimes they already exist. And if you like what one of those silhouettes on the internet already looks like, use it. Okay, use it, especially if it's something simple like an animal or a plant or something like that. I'm going to stretch mine, make mine just a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm doing on the screen a little better. But I'm going to click on it, Okay, and as soon as you click on your photo, your black and white photo, up here on the options bar at the very top, you'll get a little thing that says image trace up here. So there's a bunch of little buttons. They say like embed, edit in Photoshop, and then they say image trace. Go ahead and click image trace. Okay, and at first, like, you may not necessarily notice it did anything, but it did. What we want to do now is we want to open up the settings. So once you've hit image trace, the options bar updates and it has different things that pop up here. What I want you to look for is right next to the word default and the word view, like in between those two, there's a little box. Okay, that little box symbol is the settings for image trace. Just click that and open that up. And so that's right here. Okay, just tap that. Okay, and it'll pop up. And of course, there's a bunch of different ways you can get to image trace. This is just one of those ways. But when you're clicked on it by default, it's going to do a handful of different things. Number one, if your picture starts out in black and white, it's going to leave it in black and white. If you want it to be in color later, you have to remember to change this option to color, or else it will only let you make it shades of gray or black and white later on. So let's swap where it says mode to color. Okay. And I can also go under the preset and I can change different looks. So like I could try high fidelity photo. And if I give it a second, it'll probably get more detailed. Okay. I can try out like black and white logo and see what it does. We don't want our characters to become so like simplistic that we can't really tell what they are anymore. You could try silhouettes. Silhouettes actually looks okay to me. Not terrible. And under silhouettes, or sorry, not under silhouettes, but down here under advanced, okay, you can also choose to ignore colors. When I choose the silhouette option, it automatically ignores white, but you can always hit this little eyedropper. And if you've got a different color, like a red background or something, you can click on it with the eyedropper and it will ignore that specific color so that you don't even have to delete it later. It's just going to save these as individual little images or little shapes. Okay, so if yours looks good, if you're happy with it, let's go ahead. One last thing up here at the top, you got to hit expand so that they all break apart into little individual shapes. Okay, so hit expand. And by default, they're still going to be grouped together. And sometimes when you trace stuff, it'll have multiple groups within groups, within groups, within groups in a really annoying way. Okay, and just be prepared. There's no way that I know of to kind of dictate that ahead of time. But we can go up to object and we can hit group or ungroup. And it should, in theory, let go of each one so that they're individual because these are simple enough. Okay, now I want you to pick one of these silhouettes that is a character. Okay, so I'm probably just going to pick Big Angry Shrek right here. But you can pick, you know, Shrek like this or Donkey or Pinocchio or Gingy, right? Gingy? I can't remember what his name is. Little Gingerbread Man. Okay, or the dragon, or whatever makes you happy. I think this is Fiona's side silhouette. But pick one of these. I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to actually draw a box and snatch all these up and scoot them out of the way. And I'm going to grab one, and I'm going to put it over here on my artboard. And I'm just going to stretch it and make it really big. So it fills up the majority of it. As best it can, anyway. All right, so if we've got that, let's turn this into a mask. Right now it's just a silhouette. Let's put a picture inside it. Okay, and let's grab this picture of Shrek and Donkey when they're looking at like that little introductory thing in the first movie that tells them about Lord Farquaad's land. I can't remember what his cities. Does anybody remember for any reason? What? Oh, okay, nice. Yes, okay. So I'm going to take this picture. We do want to make sure it's behind your silhouette. So if you need to click on the picture, right click on it, hit arrange, and just send it to the back. Okay, whatever you're going to cut out and create a mask of, that shape, that outline always has to sit on top of the picture that you're going to put inside it. And so if you've got those kind of lined up, I'm just going to click and draw a box to select them both at the same time. And if I right click, I can hit make clipping mask. Easy peasy. Now, if you don't love how they fit inside your shape, you can change it really easy. Okay, right now they're one big shape, but if you double click on it, you can go inside the group and I can scoot the picture around so that it fits better in my shape, because depending on which character you kind of picked out, your photo might fit better in different ways. So again, make sure both pictures are selected and you right click on them and hit make clipping mask. But just kind of rearrange yours in there to where we can see all of the silhouette. It's all filled up with photo, but we can also kind of see that Donkey and Shrek are in there. Okay. I think I might do kind of like that. And you can also stretch the picture or shrink the picture and adjust it as much as you want to. So like if I wanted to make it bigger, I could. It's very easy to edit what's in your clipping mask. And that's something that you may not have really had a reason to do yet, even though you all have been making clipping masks. It's very easy to adjust it. Okay, so if you like what it looks like, just double click on it to let go. And then the only other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this not super high res picture of the swamp and I'm just going to stretch it to where it kind of fits in the background. Yeah, that looks good and tacky, right? Real tacky. But that'll work. Okay, so I'm just going to use that as a background. Don't do this in your actual thing. And you can kind of adjust it however you want to crop it in so that it fits on there. Now, what else I want you to show you to do really quick, and part of the reason why I picked something that doesn't look great underneath it, is I just want to show you how to make a drop shadow. I know we've learned it before at one point in time, but we haven't like actively talked about it in a long time. So click on that cutout you have, whatever your shape was, Shrek or Dragon or whatever it was. Click on your cutout, your clipping mask, and go up to Effect at the very top, and go down to Stylize. Okay. Maybe I like, oh no, sorry, top stylize. I forget, sometimes there's one at the bottom and one at the top that are called the same thing. Go to the stylize at the top and you're going to choose drop shadow. Okay. Just like in Photoshop, we can add a drop shadow and it just makes it easier to see some things that are, you know, two different pictures laying on top of each other. So I could come in here and if I wanted to get crazy, I could pick out like red as my drop shadow color. And I could change the blending mode of it. Multiply is usually the default. I can turn up the opacity. And I can also play with the offsets just to make sure that like I can see them. And you can even play with the blur too. So still doesn't look amazing, but now you've been reminded that you can make a drop shadow in Illustrator. And even if this one doesn't look amazing, like we have one. It's a drop shadow. It exists. Okay. So just something I want to make sure that everybody knows how to do. All right. So that will be the big premise of this project is to come up with some kind of big silhouette that you're going to stuff some stuff inside of. Now you don't have to do a big ugly background like what we did. And I am going to have you real quick. If you've got a shadow and you've got a silhouette made, let's export this really quick. I'm just going to give you a daily grade for it. So let's just go up to File and hit Export and just export it as a PNG. You can just call it masking exercise or Shrek or whatever makes you happy. Okay. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint for just a second. Okay, so now that we've practiced that, let's talk a little bit more about your project requirements. Okay, and I'll pause there for a second. I'll let you save what you need to save and upload what you need to save. But again, your drop shadow doesn't have to look any certain type of way. I just want you to have a drop shadow. Now, does anybody know for any reason, this is from 2016, so it's been a while, this movie poster that's on the screen, it is for a real movie. Anybody know what it's for? Yeah, The Revenant. Okay, it's a movie where Leonardo DiCaprio gets mauled viciously by a bear. Yeah, among other things. It's a good movie. It was an award-winning movie that year. But yeah, it's an older movie now. But yeah, so that movie about, you know, man versus bear, pretty decent little setup there for the poster, right? You get that once you know that's what it's about. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and mention to you your project requirements. All right, you do need to pick a movie, video game, or book, or if you feel very passionately about a TV show, we can discuss that. But I would prefer you pick a video game, movie, or book. We're going to do it in 12 by 18, CMYK, Illustrator. And part of why we're doing it in Illustrator is I want you to stay true to the cell shading style. Cell shading style is easier to create in Illustrator, and creating things that are super highly detailed and shaded in are harder to do in Illustrator. So I think this will help kind of keep you in check in that way. You do have to include some kind of monochromatic landscape with basic graphics. And so we looked at some landscapes a few minutes ago, like these. Okay, both of these, they're not exactly monochromatic, but they're pretty close. Monochromatic just means mono one, chroma meaning color, monochromatic means one color. So choose one color as a landscape, and you can use different shades and tints. So, like light versions, dark versions, medium versions of that color. If you pick blue or green or red or purple, you can add a little bit of differentiation in there. Like if you look at the one on the top left, there's a little bit of orange in there. It's not just red, there's a little bit of orange or a little bit of yellow. And that's okay. But keep it mostly monochromatic for the landscape part at the very least. And you can do two different ones. Like Stranger Things, they have a landscape on top that's all orange colors with a silhouette. And on the bottom and the upside down, they have blue colors with a landscape. And you can do that sort of thing if you have two different sceneries that you want to add in there. But both of those examples there were monochromatic. So you need a monochromatic landscape. You should have a clear main subject in the foreground, that is silhouette. It does not actually have to be person. So like this one on the screen, it's a bear. That's the big silhouette, the big shape that other things are inside of. And it has a monochromatic landscape in there with it. But you need to have some kind of big main subject that is a clipping mask of some kind. Okay. And you can put, by the way, I didn't mention this before, you can put just about as many images as you want inside a clipping mask. So even though we only put the photo of Shrek and Donkey inside of a shape, we could have put 20 pictures inside of that shape. Okay, so you can do many, many different things inside there. You do need two secondary subjects. So like characters from the movie or the book, animals, aliens, robots, other significant things. Okay, like if you're doing maybe Aladdin, the genie's lamp would be a significant type object, some kind of other secondary subject that you can include. Okay, you do need a layer mask like what we just made, and you should have the title of the work somewhere. You can add other relevant information if you want. So you could add like made by Bethesda or like starring Leonardo DiCaprio or whatever, or award winning 2020, whatever. Okay, you can add those extra things if you want, but at the very minimum, it needs to have the title. I would recommend if you can find a logo of your movie, TV show, video game, whatever. So, like, I know one of you picked Destiny 2. So, like, you can probably Google Destiny 2 logo, and hopefully we won't get the little robot. We did get the little robot a little bit, but yeah, you can look for the fonts that actually already exist, and you can do an image trace on those. Same thing with, like, I know one of the movies in there was Black Swan. Text logo. I could try text logo. And I forget that Black Swan is not just a movie. Let's add movie in there. Okay, and you can get like the actual logo from that. So I would recommend try and find that. If it fits your style, use it. It's recognizable. It'll be a little easier for you to build. But if you feel very passionately about picking your own font, you can do that too. Just like with these posters here that are very similar to what we're doing, they don't use the Black Swan font. They use their own. So just some food for thought on what you want to create. Okay, so again, you should have the title and any other information that you feel like is relevant or vital. And the title should be reasonably large. It doesn't have to be massive, but reasonably large. And then just use the inspiration of these two artists that we looked at today, okay, as your sort of basis. I'll show you some previous student work. Let's see. And maybe I don't have all of the student work now that I realize some of you did it last year too. Okay, so here's some previous student work. Some of them, like all of the examples I ever show you, are better than others. Some of them feel more complete than others. But you can see the silhouettes. You can see the monochromatic color scheme. Okay, try not to just rip off one of the posters that's in the slideshow, whether it be a professional person's poster or a student one. Okay, don't let your text feel like an afterthought either. Okay, it should be a part of your design that feels like it's actually in there and it's not just like stuck on the top left corner. Because otherwise, the Fantastic Beasts one, that's interesting to look at, but it does feel like they were like, oh, I got to put the title on there real quick. and they just kind of put it in there. Whereas the one on the Martian, it is a part of that is like a space helmet that we're looking at inside there, and it's at the bottom. So make it feel like it actually has a place. Okay, make sure all of your colors and images do have high contrast. Even though you're doing monochromatic, we want to make sure we can still see all of the things that you're taking the time to draw and put in there. So we need to have enough color differentiation that we can see stuff really well. And these are some pretty decent and okay examples. So, like, we can read Batman, the animated series, really clearly. The one on the right is really lovely, but it is all very similar tones of red. And if it had been just a little bit lighter, a little bit darker in some places, it might have been a little easier to read or see certain details that are in there. Okay, same thing with some of these. All right. So, again, think about your font, because that Alice in Wonderland one is cool, but I do feel like the font was maybe, later choice. So where will you put that? Okay, and make sure you do have high contrast. What colors feel important to your book or your story? And not everything has to be completely colored in, like that dragon that you see over there. Some things can just be line work as well. Just kind of depends on what you want to do for your particular style. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's about it. Okay. Those are the basics. If you do look back on Canvas, there's a page that just says intro to this project. It's got all the requirements copied and pasted on there for you so you can glance at them quickly. But it's also got the slideshow that we just looked at. Down at the bottom, I have a few little helpful video things. Like one of them is just how to image trace in case you're just having one of those days and you're like, where is this? I can't remember how to do it. Okay. There's also one on here on how to make clipping masks. It's just 2 minutes in case you forget how to do that, because a lot of you are too shy to ask me how to do things. There's also one on cell shading, but we'll get into some more of this. We'll do a few more demos together. Moving on. Okay. For the rest of today, I do want you to just finish your other assignments you have not finished yet. If you haven't, the only other thing I might recommend that you do is I might recommend you go ahead and claim whatever you would like to do your movie poster or your poster design on. So throw your name in this document. You can click this link right here, and you can just write out what you would like to do, because I'm only going to let one person do any given thing. So once, like, Black Swan is claimed, nobody else can do Black Swan. Okay, just like with the motivational stained glass. But otherwise, work on what you need to work on, get done with what you need to get done with. Okay? You don't have to start the sketch yet or anything like that. All right? Does anybody have any general questions? Okay, we're super quiet.